Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. There's a bunch of legal news surrounding Donald Trump today, as there is seemingly every day these days. None of it particularly good for the ex-president. First up today, a federal judge in West Palm Beach said he will consider releasing some of the affidavits central to last week's search of Donald Trump's Florida property. Judge Bruce Reinhart ordered the Department of Justice to submit a redacted version of the document that would not undermine its ongoing investigation. He will then decide in 1 week whether to make that version of the document public. That's a little surprising. We'll have more on that. While we are a long way from potential criminal charges against the ex-president, let alone a conviction, we've already got Trump's former lawyer publicly speculating about him running for a second term while indicted.
Merrick Garland is now crazy. He is going to indict Donald Trump. They're going to figure out some charge because they want to harm him, to ruin him, to basically cut him off at the knees so he can't run for president. Eugene Debs ran for president from a federal prison. There's no reason that that's going to happen to Donald Trump. He's not going to be in a federal prison. But if he's indicted, he will run for president.
Again, no indication Trump's going to be indicted anytime soon, but Trump's close confidant, Alan Weisselberg, the former chief financial officer of the Trump Organization, that's the guy that, keeps all the books, he will be going to prison. Today, Weisselberg pleaded guilty to 15 counts of criminal conduct related to a scheme by the organization to commit tax fraud, among other charges. While the terms of Weisselberg's plea deal do not require him to testify against Trump directly, Donald Trump's former fixer, Michael Cohen, who also did some prison time for his work for Donald Trump, and who knows Weisselberg and the Trump Organization well, says either directly or indirectly, Weisselberg's testimony will implicate the ex-president.
Well, he had no other choice but to plead guilty, as Kara just stated. He was looking at 15 years based upon crimes that I had provided them documentation on that proved without a doubt that he would have been found guilty. Alan will ultimately be providing testimony that is against Donald. No matter how you want to parse it in words, it doesn't matter. He will be providing testimony.
Now, I've been covering politics for about 2 decades, and generally the rule of thumb, it's not a good thing when a politician or their associates are charged with a crime or convicted of a crime, let alone. But it happens a lot to people in Donald Trump's orbit. Let's just take a step back. Michael Cohen, who you just heard, of course, pleaded guilty to 8 counts of tax evasion, bank fraud, and then also campaign finance violations back in 2018. Those campaign finance violations stemming from a scheme in Trump's first campaign to pay hush money payments to multiple women who alleged they had extramarital affairs with the then candidate. The checks, of course, signed by Donald Trump. Cohen also negotiated hush money payments for another Trump ally, Republican mega donor and former RNC finance chairman during Trump's time, Elliot Broidy. Remember him? Now, Broidy stepped down from his position at the head of the RNC Finance Committee after it was revealed that he paid a former Playboy model more than $1.6 million to cover up their affair. Also a transaction put together by Michael Cohen, who carved out, it seems, a bit of a niche in that. Now, that, of course, in and of itself is not illegal, but, of course, you might have forgotten this one. Broidy also actually pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to violate the Foreign Agents Registration Act back in 2020 for his work as an unregistered lobbyist on behalf of a Malaysian development company. Broidy was also allegedly embroiled in a scheme along with a man named George Nader. Remember him? He had met with the Trump campaign, had some liaisons with them. The scheme was to lobby the Trump White House on behalf of the Saudis and the United Arab Emirates. Now, Nader was charged with illegally funding UAE money into the 2016 election. He's now serving 10 years in prison for child sex trafficking and child pornography offenses. Speaking of the UAE, Tom Barrack, longtime friend of Trump, associate, spoke at the RNC in 2016 in that campaign. He was the chair of the 2017 inaugural committee. He was indicted last year for his unregistered lobbying on behalf of a Gulf nation. Barrack was the one who told the Trump campaign to hire Paul Manafort as campaign manager back in 2016. And Manafort ultimately pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges relating to money he earned working as an unregistered foreign agent for Ukraine. You sensing a theme here on the America First campaign? Manafort was also pardoned by Donald Trump. Manafort's close ally, Rick Gates, who was Trump's deputy campaign manager, pleaded guilty for assisting Manafort in laundering that Ukrainian money, as well as lying to the FBI. And the unregistered lobbying still does not end there. Trump's first national security advisor, Michael Flynn, He was also accused of acting as an unregistered agent on behalf of the Turkish government, though he never charged for that misconduct. He did, of course, plead guilty to lying to the FBI about his communications with Russian officials, though he later tried to change his story. The Trump's Department of Justice tried to drop the case against him, even though he'd already pleaded guilty before he was, again, ultimately pardoned by Donald Trump. There was a man named George Papadopoulos, also on that Trump campaign team back in 2016, the foreign policy team. He also pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about his contacts with Russians, like Flynn. He was also pardoned by Trump in 2020, as was Roger Stone, longtime friend, associate, Trump advisor, the man who takes credit for convincing Trump to run for president in the first place. Before Stone's pardon, he was convicted of lying to Congress and witness intimidation back in 2019 and sentenced to 3 years in prison. Now, Trump campaign CEO and senior White House advisor Steve Bannon, he's an interesting case. Bannon was charged with conspiracy to commit mail fraud and money laundering. Remember, the Postal Service cops picked him up on a Chinese billionaire's yacht? And those charges stemmed from an alleged grift that allegedly bilked millions of dollars from Trump supporters for a bogus plan to crowdfund Trump's border wall, creatively titled, "We Build the Wall." Trump pardoned Bannon before he could even go to trial, but then Bannon, just intent on getting into prison last month, was convicted of 2 counts of contempt of Congress for his refusal to cooperate with the January 6th committee subpoena. Speaking of contempt for Congress, let us not forget the one and only Peter Navarro, another Trump White House advisor. He has also been indicted for contempt of Congress for his refusal to cooperate with the committee. He has pleaded not guilty and is awaiting trial. Navarro and Bannon are not the only Trump allies facing current potential legal consequences for their role in the attempted coup. Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani, last seen in Atlanta, where he was testifying before a grand jury, he is now the target, it has been confirmed, of a local criminal investigation in Georgia from the Fulton County DA's office for his role trying to overturn the election in that state. He testified before a grand jury there yesterday. That's a lot. I mean, it's more than any politician I've ever covered in my life. It's more than any politician I would be willing to bet that anyone has ever covered in this country in the last 2 decades. The cult of criminality surrounding Donald Trump has been present since he first ran for president. So Trump executive Alan Weisselberg, really just the latest in a very long list of people charged with crimes in Trump's orbit. And given where we are now with the amount of investigations, criminal investigations going on, it shows no sign of slowing down.